changing the channel is just like the shorthand for us of like, try to get her onto a different like wave, you know? And so I think the classic times are like, you know, when she's like, I don't want to take a bath and she's having a meltdown. And it's like, okay, what can we do?
Welcome to Startup Dad, the podcast where we dive deep into the lives of dads who are also leaders in the world of startups and business. I'm your host, Adam Fishman. Parenting a toddler requires an unending supply of patience. And today I'm joined by Michael Leibovich to talk about it. He's the head of growth at Adobe and the GM of their Behance platform. He's worked at Vimeo, AppFolio, and Abstract, and prior to all of that was a professional touring musician. More importantly, he's a husband and the father of a 2.5-year-old daughter. We talked about patience, both with a 2.5-year-old and with aging parents. He also told me about a unique approach that he and his wife take for getting parenting advice that doesn't involve the internet. Some frameworks for working with a toddler, including change the channel, how becoming a dad has changed his approach to leading teams, and an incredibly cool use of AI for exploring new mealtime options for a picky eater. If you like what you hear, please subscribe to Startup Dad on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple. Hello, Michael. Welcome to Startup Dad. It's a pleasure having you here with me today. Thanks for joining me.
Thanks so much. I'm excited to be here, Adam.
All right. I wanted to give a special first shout out to Ben Erez, who connected the two of us. I recorded a fantastic episode with Ben a little while back that's going to release in a couple of weeks. So we are all in the shadows of greatness here.
Ben said he had a lot of fun.
I've been told often that this is the most fun podcast that people are ever on. So,
ooh, that's a high bar.
I don't know. I'm just saying. Okay, well, I'm really excited for this conversation. Thank you, Ben, for introducing the two of us. You, sir, have a 2.5-year-old daughter and a spouse who also works full-time outside of the home. With a 2.5-year-old, you know, I haven't had a 2.5-year-old in a while, but if I recall, patience is the name of the game. Tell me a little bit about what you're learning about patience with a 2.5-year-old.
I think I'm kind of learning everything about patience. Like in our day jobs, you know, we're sort of rewarded for not being patient. You know, there's kind of this like, be decisive, let's go, let's make decisions. And like what I'm finding with, you know, I mean, really since our daughter was born up to now is just this whole like learn to trust the process, which is kind of a new, I think, muscle for me to flex and develop. And our daughter is like wanting to do everything by herself, which takes 10 times longer. And there's sort of this constant like negotiating of like, you know, okay, do we have the extra 10 minutes for her to put a sock on? And so it's like taking a step back and just kind of realizing like she's developing, like she's an independent human being. It's exciting. It's, you know, it's like such an honor to get to experience that. But my initial gut reaction is always like, put on the effing sock, like, let's go, you know? And so, you know, it's always this like tug and pull, I think, especially waking up in the morning with her, then transitioning into sort of work day and sort of bringing a different kind of energy and then sort of transitioning back into dad mode and, you know, trying to learn to toggle that on a bit more.
You know, not that you've been doing this for that long with a 2.5-year-old, but do you have any ways that you kind of get in and out of dad mode when it's, you know, work time versus dad time?
I'd heard a few other people kind of recommend this. And, you know, I've been working remote now for at least 6 years. And so I think it's especially challenging because you're sort of under the same roof making that transition. You know, I've been fairly like good and disciplined about kind of keeping like my office space. Like when I'm in here, this is work, and I step out of that door, you know, it's like I just leave it behind. And like having a physical space that can help, I think, make that transition has been really helpful. You know, I think the other thing is like leaving the phone. You know, if I want to be constantly plugged into work, you know, there's 100 tools for me constantly vying for my attention. And so having to also sort of say, okay, I'm going to put the phone, I'm going to leave the phone in the office until she goes down, you know, and sort of having a physical space has made that transition a lot easier and has helped my brain, I think, also disconnect and sort of go, okay, here I am. I want to be present in this moment.
Yeah. It's like your little severance moment. Step through the threshold, dad mode.
Totally. Yes. So I'm like, in any mode, Mike is like in the office. Outie mode goes out to like hang out with his daughter.
Love that. Love that. Okay. I would be remiss if I did not ask you if you have a story of your 2.5-year-old doing something that really pushed the limits of patience, like an incredibly frustrating, obviously there's the 10-minute sock. I think everyone's probably had the 10-minute sock putting on exercise. What is one of the like most patience trying moments for having a toddler?
I think what's so funny about that question is like all the examples seem so mundane, like I have 100 versions of the sock story. Like just this morning, it was the only cereal that we had was Special K. And so I poured her a bowl. She's like starting to eat cereal in the morning. And she was like, I don't want strawberries. And I'm like, I'm sorry. You like strawberries.
Was it the Special K with the red berries? Like the dried
Yes, the red
ones?
berries. Yes. Yeah.
I mean, that's a delicious cereal. Let's be honest.
She eats like the dried red berries like on her own. We get them from Trader Joe's. And so I'm like, I don't understand the connection here. And we're sort of having this debate. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to pick the strawberries out. I'm like trying to sort of explain like you can eat around the strawberries. Like it's not the end of the world. But it was complete meltdown. My wife's out of town for work, so it's just like me on duty here. And there are those types of stories where I'm like, there's two things happening. There's some clear emotional response she's having, and then there's all the the way that I kind of move through life, which is like less emotional, a little bit more rational. I'm trying to like reason with her. And so the hardest challenge too has also just been like trying to meet her where she's at. I think advice that friends have given in the past is just like, first recognize that she's frustrated, that she doesn't want strawberries, and then try to move beyond that. There's something about allowing your kid to know you see them or hear them. But like, that's just like an example that happened this morning where I'm like, mother, just eat the strawberries, eat the strawberries.
It probably yesterday she loved the strawberries in the cereal.
She did, Adam. Yeah. She did. She ate them yesterday. I don't know what happened today.
Awesome. Every day a new adventure. So another aspect of your life that probably requires a lot of patience. This is the theme for the beginning of this episode, in case you haven't figured it out. You're navigating life not only with a toddler, 2.5-year-old, but also with a set of aging parents. And this is a thing that, you are a similarly aged person to me. This is a thing that a lot of us have to deal with now. It's like we're raising a kid and then we're kind of also parenting our parents in a way. What has that experience been like watching your parents get older, and like how have you had to change kind of that dynamic with them?
My parents are in their 80s. We're obviously starting our family. I'm in my 40s. My parents were in their 40s when they had me. So there's a bit of that same cycle. And right around the time our daughter was born, they, have been living independently, but they just started falling, kind of once a month. There was like a spill and a fall. And then my dad, just fell in the driveway picking up the newspaper, broke his elbow, and was, basically out of commission for 3 months. That has started to happen. Then also, I think I grew up in, a very kind of classic, like blue collar home. And my parents also didn't really have much of a plan for like what happens as this starts to, happen. And so to be kind of in that middle ground and sort of going, okay, well, what's next? Like, what's the kind of help that you need? Like, and coming up with a plan with them is sort of weird, where the child becomes the parent. We, over the last year, ended up kind of getting them more open to the idea of transitioning into like independent living, where they have kind of more phased help, get their home on the market, move into a independent living community about 2 months ago. And so there's sort of that where, there's a part of me that, wishes I could be closer and kind of more available to help them. But then there's also just the reality that, raising a toddler is not easy. Most of us hope to be able to rely on our family to some degree. They're just not in a physical place where they can do that. And that is its own kind of side of the story that kind of let's kind of do what we can and make sure that like our daughter and her grandparents can like have quality time together for whatever that looks like. But it's a lot, I think sort of juggling kind of both sides is like a lot more exhausting because there's just a lot of decisions to do and a lot of facilitating, on top of just normal life and full-time job and all that.
You're kind of stuck in the middle of these barbells of people who need you on either end, 80 years apart. And you've got to hold down a job and thrive in that job and, have the energy for your 2.5-year-old and things like that. So yeah, definitely a challenging time. I'm also certain that this is a thing that a lot of people are wrestling with. So probably very helpful for people to hear that they're not alone in this challenge.
Yeah, simple things, honestly, like realizing my parents didn't really have like a will or a trust set up, and like going and helping them do that. And then realizing like, oh, we should be doing that. There's sort of been a benefit to us to realize like, I want to do the things that my parents weren't able for whatever reason to do. And so learning how to help them is also like getting things jump started for us too. And so I count that as a win.
Yeah, you're like 40 years ahead of the game now from your,
exactly.
from your parents.
Exactly.
So you work at Adobe as a GM and a head of growth for a couple of pretty big product lines. You've also been at Vimeo. I'm going to go out on a limb here and assume that creativity is kind of important to you. And we'll get in a little bit more to your first career before that. That's coming up. I'm curious how you think about nurturing creativity and curiosity in your 2.5-year-old daughter.
I think my like kind of first language of creativity is music, and maybe we can talk a little bit about that. Growing up though, like my dad worked 3 jobs. My mom was also a working parent. And even though they were always kind of busy keeping things going, like there was always space to be creative and curious. And what that has resulted, I think, for me, and maybe it's a bit of like confirmation bias, but like being more curious, nurturing creativity has like helped me think through problem solving from different angles. I think it has like nurtured more sort of empathy, especially in like building product, how important that is. So there's a lot of like, frankly, like commercial benefits, but just the like fun of it, like getting to create your own world, whatever that looks like. So, for us, we have a lot of instruments like around the house. We have a regular piano in the living room. I have a keyboard and guitars and a lot of instruments. So we do sort of a lot of open like music time. She's 2, so it's really just like her slamming her hands on things and like making unfortunate noise that is trying to sound like music, but it's like just nurturing that. Part of our routine is like carving out that time of just like, great, here's going to be our creativity time. Let her explore things like tactile things. And she's already like seems to be fairly like musically inclined and, kind of singing babble, But yeah, it's really important. I feel so lucky to sort of to be at the intersection of sort of working in tech, but sort of on behalf or for like creative communities. It's something important to me, and it's something that we try to pass on too. So my wife's also musical. And so, it's like maybe one day we have a family band,
I love that. So I have a couple follow-ups for you on this one.
Yeah.
The first one is, have you bought your daughter a ukulele yet? Because it's a very good-sized instrument for tiny hands. And then the second one is she more drawn to the keys or the strings or like just still beating things, maybe more percussion?
She does love the ukulele. So that's been great. In terms of her gravitating, she's actually gravitated most towards the drums, which is interesting, like has a good sense of rhythm. Maybe that's because she's at the like banging my fist phase,
Yeah.
So it'll be interesting to see like, as she gets a little bit older. The thing I'm trying to at least like help her now is sort of the idea of like one finger on one piano key, and just sort of like, just try that. But also like at this age, even learning dynamics. So it's sort of like, what does loud sound like? What does soft sound like? Some of that is like even more simple to kind of comprehend for her than notes or, anything like that.
Right. Oh, that's very cool. I didn't even think about that. Like, here's how to make a loud sound. Here's how to make a not loud sound. Let's focus more on the not loud sounds. Does your daughter go to preschool?
She does, yeah.
Okay, so another creative thing. What do you do with the torrent of, and I'm putting these in air quotes, artwork that comes home with her from preschool.
Oh my gosh.
Well, maybe for folks who don't have preschool age kids or have forgotten what this is like, maybe you could tell people why I'm putting artwork in air quotes. Like what comes home from preschool?
So she has a little cubby that they put like, her empty lunchbox at the end of the day. And every single day in that cubby, we're pulling things out. And there's some, piece of paper that has a scribble on it. Our daughter's name is Lenny. And they're like, Lenny drew this for you today. And I'm like, it's mostly just scribble. Otherwise, yeah, it's a lot. I mean, literally every day. Every day we come home with something new.
Yeah. Are you taking pictures of it and storing it, in the archives for all of perpetuity? Or are you kind of like, oh, that's a nice scribble, into the recycling bin it goes?
If I'm being totally honest, which why wouldn't I be? Like most of it goes right into the recycling bin. Every now and then there's like something that I'm like, oh, this is fun. And I kind of had this idea of scanning all of these early images and then using like Adobe has an app called Adobe Fresco where you can like scan it, vectorize it. And then I'm thinking, maybe by the time she's 5 or 6 and like experimenting more with digital art, she'll have some interest. Maybe she won't because 90% of the things my parents saved for me, I'm like, why did you keep this? This was for you, not for me. But there's like a good like 10% of drawings that we're holding on to, but the rest of it, and you feel bad because you're just like, they're sending it home. Like, am I a shitty parent for sort of just like throwing this in the trash? But like, It accumulates.
Let's just go out there right now and tell everyone 10% is about enough, I think. Good rule of thumb.
Totally.
Here. Let's come back to music for a second. I hinted at this. Tech's kind of a second career for you. And your first career was as a touring musician. Tell me about that. I think that's fascinating.
So I went to college at Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo area, met some guys, and we sort of started a band in college. And, this was like early 2000s. So the early, Napster era, LimeWire, sort of all those torrent sites were starting to take off. And obviously on the industry side, the music industry was like completely being disrupted. But as like just some random guys on the Central Coast in California, it became like this incredible sort of distribution engine. And so we just started putting our music online and building organic fans in, Kentucky and Missouri and New York and Alabama and kind of all across the country, enough so that we were like, let's just book a tour and kind of go to these places where we've started to see people listening and picking up our music. There was like an indie record label at the time that sort of had got wind of that. We had signed a deal to an indie record label. We kind of kept doing that. The silliest story of all was like, back in the day, college libraries, had all these computers and, you didn't need an independent login or whatever. And there was a music site at the time called Pure Volume. We had our music on there and we figured out that like the top 10 charts reset at midnight Eastern, 9 p.m. on our side. And we would flood the library, all of us, and just play our songs. We'd get on like 50 different computers. We'd get on the top 10 charts. And then it would kind of organically spiral from there. And like, that was like a big way of us sort of initially kind of hacking. And, you kind of see at least where I've gone in my career, like there's some combination of that, right? Of just trying to kind of find some kind of wedge. So we kind of built a decent sized fan base. We ended up signing at the time to MySpace Records, which was a subsidiary of Interscope Records. And this was 2005, 2006, when MySpace was the second most popular website. And so we ended up touring all around the world until probably 2009 or so, and went out on the road with like just some funny like 90s bands like Hanson and the Gin Blossoms and Jimmy Eat World and, some of these groups. And I mean, it was a total blast. It's like when I look back, I feel like I got to live, what you hope to live in retirement, of just like traveling. And even though we were, eating like ramen and sleeping on random people's floors throughout, it was like I got to see places I never imagined. And, playing in a stadium in Japan to like 13,000 people, like just some wild experiences. And then at the like crash of 08, 09, everything started to unwind. And we were like, starting to get into our later 20s and going like, do we want to keep doing this as a grind, And so that was sort of like the transition out of it, of just realizing like, as an artist, it's like really hard to earn a living kind of wrapped that phase up or whatever before I made my way into tech. But, it's just an incredible experience. I had hair then, Adam. I mean, you wouldn't even believe the beautiful curly locks of hair I had on my head then.
Oh, that's funny. Maybe the third person I know who like spent a significant amount of time as a performing, touring musician before they went into this second career of tech. I guess something about tech just kind of attracts like creative, also the grind of performing and touring, like kind of really prepares you for, gosh, I don't know, being an entrepreneur, building your own company in some ways. So yeah, cool. What a story. Okay, so back to parenting. You and your wife, I am told, do not search online for parenting advice, which I think is awesome. But you do something that's kind of unique instead. And I was hoping you could tell my listeners about what it is that you do instead of random Google searches for info.
Even before we had our daughter, we were like, there's no shortage of advice. And like, I think the hardest thing as a new parent is like, you're overwhelmed with decisions that feel so like the gravity of every decision feels, so heavy. It's like everything from, do I do regular diapers? Do I do these reusable diapers? Like every single question. And there are 10 opinions if you want to go find them. And so we were like, instead of sort of getting overwhelmed and trying to navigate like the hundreds of micro decisions we're going to have to make, let's just reach out to other parents that we've seen or gotten to know from the outside looking in, sort of kind of go, okay, these are the kind of parents we want to be more like, or these are the kids they have that we would love ours to turn out more like. And so we started like a group text thread basically. And so it's like a text thread of parents that was initially started for like our benefit, but now it's sort of like everybody's kind of sharing. And anytime something happens that we don't really know what to do about, we just kind of reach out to that thread. And what's great is it's not like a homogenous group. Like we have a few parents on there that kind of follow the attachment parenting kind of style, others that don't, so it's also sort of nice to get, even if it's 3 or 4 differing opinions, but from 10 people you know or respect or admire. It's just made such a difference. It's made our lives so much easier to navigate kind of all of these questions, that you really don't know the answer to.
Yeah. How did you introduce the concept of this group? Did you just reach out to all these folks and say like, hey, we want to create a parent advisory board?
Basically, yeah. And people were like, oh, that's a cool idea. Yeah. It was like, unlike maybe another advisory board, there was no like ask for a commitment of time and you guarantee to respond, X number of times a week, but just sort of more casual and frankly, just more vulnerable. I think what we said was like, hey, this whole world is new to us. It feels overwhelming. For our benefit, we're hoping to like make it less overwhelming by not spending hours searching the internet. And so like, we'd love, if we can start a group thread. And it was kind of that organically.
There's a few themes wrapped up in that too, which is, some of the ones that I'm hearing are, you mentioned that all of these folks had kind of parenting outcomes that you appreciated or liked. You're like, oh, I like how that kid has turned out so far. And that's an interesting thing too, because parenting is one of the longest running experiments that you can have. You don't actually know what's going to happen. So to be able to look at somebody else and be like, their kid ended up okay. I kind of like their vibe. That was sort of one theme. And then the other one that you mentioned was, the diversity of parenting styles. And so here you have a group of folks who have all parented in slightly different ways. And yet all of their kids, at least by your, evaluation, have turned out pretty good. It's also really interesting that, and gets to a point that's like kind of a theme of this show, which is that like, things work differently for different people. And so there's maybe no right or wrong style necessarily. There's just the one that you like the best, you're the most comfortable with. And most of the time that kid's going to turn out okay. What kind of questions have you asked that group text? Or like, what's the one that you kind of remember the most?
Oh my God. Yeah. So when our daughter was like 6 months old, she went without pooping for like 9 days straight. And this is the most terrifying thing in the world. Like everything feels so fragile, So I'm just like, I don't know. She's drinking milk. Like, I don't understand. Where is it going? Like, how are you not pooping for 9 days straight?
Tiny body. Where's she storing all this?
Exactly. And so like by day, like 2 or day 3, we're like, is this weird? Like this is a classic question of like, should we be worried? What should we do? And like, quickly got feedback from people where they're like, this isn't abnormal. Someone was like, our kid went like, 2 weeks. And I'm like, oh my God. And most of them were like, if it goes on to like, day 7 or whatever, like call your pediatrician. But if there doesn't seem to be any other symptom, it's like literally like WebMD with, group chat. And that was so helpful because I'm just like, if you search for that, it's like you're going to find any answer you're looking for and all the ones you hope not to. And so the types of people that we invite to that and the types of parents we want to be are like not full of fear and anxiety. Like that's mostly the outcome of just like, yeah, this is hard work and it's like navigating newness in a lot of different ways, but I don't want to live in fear about things. And so that was also kind of the like big reason for us was just like, let's talk to people who are going to tell us things will be fine, but also kind of guide us, And I think the other big thing that is helpful about this group chat for us is it's not just about sort of what decision you made. For me, it's like, how did you come to that? Like that's always like, I think where I'm most interested to dig in. And so it's like, for instance, friends that, kind of go the reusable diaper route. It's like, how did you come to it? And then you kind of learn like, okay, these are the values that sort of were behind that, or like here were personal experiences. And you kind of realize like, okay, that's also helpful. It's not just like, do this, don't do this. Because most of it is, probably all of it is not binary, And so like getting to understand like people's thought processes is also just, I'm kind of nerdy and always interested in that anyway, But that's been another benefit.
People have talked about having like a little bit of a parental advisory board on this show, but the first time I've heard about the concept of having like a tight group text with people that you respect and have context with. And so what a cool idea. So kudos to you and your wife for that. Okay. So something that maybe happened before you had this text group set up, you have a really wild story from the birth of your daughter. And I wonder if you could tell that on this show. And this is not to, give people fear and anxiety, but I think it's to set the stage that parenting is kind of a curveball of a journey from the minute that baby comes into the world. Tell me about that story.
Maybe to kick that off. So we went through IVF. The process for us of getting pregnant was already a journey. My wife had a really smooth sort of pregnancy. She probably would not agree with me on the first trimester part, but from my perspective, like everything was safe and healthy along the way. She went into labor relatively quickly, maybe 2.5, 3 hours into active labor. Her OB came in and just sort of said, I don't think the baby is going to be able to get out through the birth canal. And so I think we're going to need to do an emergency C-section. We hadn't really talked in advance about, sort of, I guess, all of the possible ways for her to deliver and sort of what her preferences were or otherwise. But we're like, okay, like, my wife was like, let's do it. And so like, from the moment we said, let's do it, like everything was a bit of a blur. Like they kind of race us into this other operating room. They kind of put a sheet basically in between like my wife's neck and the rest of her body. I'm over by her head. All of this is, kind of happening. I'm like, there's probably 15 different people in the room. I just start hearing like these beeps and alarms going off. And then I hear like somebody call over, like, we have a code Noel, like didn't know what that meant. I'm just kind of going, what is happening? They pull our daughter out and they're like, here she is. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. They kind of put her under like the heat lamp. They're starting to clean her off. I just sort of can sense this frantic energy, right? At some point in this process, my wife's OB like leans over this curtain and goes, do you guys want to have more kids? And we're like, what? Like, what are you talking about? So then she goes on to explain, like, your uterus is hemorrhaging. It's basically not contracting the way it's supposed to. You're losing a lot of blood. We're doing an infusion right now. I'm trying to decide if we're going to do a hysterectomy in this like moment. I don't know any of this. My wife is like fully drugged up by this point. It didn't feel to me at the time. The doctor said like, wow, like you were so kind of like calm and like focused in the moment. This was her feedback to me. I think I was just like scared and stunned. I was like, yeah, I think we'd love to have more kids. Like, but what, like, give me the odds. Like, what are we dealing with? You know? And she was like, well, we're going to try to do an embolization. But if that is unsuccessful, like we may need to remove her uterus. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, you know, meanwhile, to my right is like this tiny human that like looks like Benjamin Mutton. I don't know why they come out looking like they're 100 years old, but like, basically, they go, okay, we need to race your wife down to radiology. We're going to operate on her for like the next 3 to 4 hours and see what we can do. Meanwhile, we're going to take you and your daughter into another room. They're like kind of looking at me and they go, she's going to need to eat soon. Like, do you guys want to do breast milk or formula? I don't know. Like, I've literally had never thought about that. You know, we had never talked about what, you know, I'm just like, well, what do we need to do to keep her alive? Like that, I think that's what I said, you know, and they were like, well, you know, formula is going to be fine. It's like, you know, if you guys want to breastfeed, it's, you know, giving her formula, you know, to start is not going to be a big deal. What struck me was I was just in this like total personal panic, wondering like, is my wife going to come out of this at all? She had lost 3/5 of her blood in like 7 minutes. I had no communication with her for a couple hours. The nurse that was in the room with us, she just didn't seem fazed. I mean, like, and I'm sure that seeing this type of stuff, like if I were to ask her later, you know, they're like, well, there's like 3 of you, you know, every week that we deal with. It's not a, you know, right. But like for me, I was just like, what do I do? And she's like, well, you can hold your daughter if you want. It's your daughter. Like, what do you want to do? And I'm just like, I don't know. Like, this is so terrifying. It was a really surreal thing because the nurse sort of walked out of the room and I hadn't had any alone time for, I don't know how many days leading up to that at all. Yeah. And all of a sudden it was just so quiet. Like it was just me, this 7-pound child that is like, you know, happy and healthy coming out. Everything about it just sort of felt so like fragile. They were able to successfully do an embolization, not a hysterectomy. My wife got to meet her about 3 hours, you know, after she was born, and everything from then on was, you know, so beautiful. But it was like a really terrifying sort of first 3 hours of our daughter's life. And to kind of be thrust into doing it solo, you know, I think that was the thing of, I've always felt like between my wife and I, like we can solve any problem. But when it was just me, I was like, I don't know, like if I could do this. Just my head went in all different directions.
That's quite a way to welcome a new kid into the world and to become a parent, you know. Has that changed anything for you or caused you to do anything differently following that experience?
I think in general, having our daughter has made me so much more like just mindful of the moments and the seconds. And I'm so much more present, you know, like than I think I was before we had her. Not just present with her, but present with my wife. It always somewhat feels cliche, but just kind of like confronting mortality, period, and whenever it sort of becomes real or a personal story, I think it's hard for it not to have some kind of transformative impact. Also, in general, it's like these kinds of stories, we share them with others, not to scare people, but to also just realize, like, we didn't have a plan. Like, that wasn't on our bingo card. And so we had to sort of, in that moment, especially being kind of in the midst of a hospital, sort of trust the experts to guide us too. So there's a part of me that, was like, I can't control what's happening right now. I think there's so many other stories of sort of realizing so much more is out of my control than I want to admit on any day-to-day basis. So I think that's like probably the biggest maybe like change from sort of me pre-child to me post is like just being a little bit more honest and recognizing how little I have control and also being more present.
What a profound experience. Would you tell folks, who are about to go into childbirth, would you say to them, hey, you might want to have a little bit of a plan or consider a few different potential things that can happen. It's obviously impossible to plan for the entire range of outcomes, but is that advice that you give folks like, hey, have a few thoughts about some different alternatives here?
Yeah, I mean, some close friends, right, have sort of opted and chosen sort of at-home births, Some of them have like gone as planned. Some of them ended up at the hospital, frankly, So if anything, I think the advice that I give is like, it's fine to have a plan, but like at least entertain what might we do if, and some people are just like, well, if I entertain that, then I'm manifesting it, and it's like, well, maybe, but also just like things can go sideways, and it's at least helpful to entertain the possibilities so that you at least kind of know what you might decide in those moments. And hopefully those moments don't come for you, but it's sort of helpful to at least kind of like walk through the what ifs, at least, in hindsight. There were so many of those what ifs, whether it was, breast milk versus formula, or otherwise that, we just hadn't even really talked about or thought through.
Yeah. So, have a bit of a plan, but remain flexible.
It's like, what the Mike Tyson quote, it's like everyone has a plan until they're punched in the face. It's kind of like exactly that.
Yep. And I suppose childbirth is about as much of a punch in the face as you can get.
Amen.
Okay. So you have a couple of frameworks that you told me about that I was hoping we could talk about here. The first one is kind of helping your daughter through some moments, some tough moments that you might be having. And you called it change the channel. So tell me about change the channel.
So change the channel. I mean, in some ways it's like classic misdirection, like I think probably all toddlers, like she can get fixated on something, sometimes she's just in an emotion. Changing the channel is just like the shorthand for us of like, try to get her onto a different like wave, And so I think the classic times are like, when she's like, I don't want to take a bath and she's having a meltdown, and it's like, okay, what can we do? There's no reasoning in explaining like, well, actually you're getting a lot of oil built up in your hair and it's time to clean. And so, it's like, for me, an example of change the channel is like asking her a question. Usually that sort of works. Like, do you want bubbles in the bath? And then she's like, yeah, I want bubbles in the bath. And so it's just like asking, usually they are in the form of, asking a question that just kind of gets her to stop and like reframe. And it's usually like fairly quick to like almost go from like meltdown to like everything's sunny in Philadelphia. I'm just like, how is this, if I'm honest as a dad, I compartmentalize things, right? So I'm changing the channel for myself. So that somewhat comes natural to me, is like, oh, distract her and like get her to change the channel. I think what's actually harder for me, but I'm trying to do it more, is actually like sometimes just meet her where she's at. Like, I can see that you're frustrated. Like, do you know why you don't want to take a bath, And like get her to maybe kind of think or talk through it, And so some of that stuff is not, easy or like first nature for me to do, but like trying to also know in the moment, like, do I just need to flip a switch for her? Mm-hmm. Or do I need to like take a moment, have her feel seen, and then maybe she can like move on from there.
Oh, I love that. And is that change the channel something like, do you and your wife use that as like code language?
Yes.
You're like, hey, we need to change the channel here. Like
exactly.
The second framework that you have, and this one's been talked about a bit on this show, but I'm curious how this manifests for you, is the importance of routine. So There is ample amounts of studies that say that kids thrive on routine. And I've heard a lot of dads talk about that structure that they have in the day-to-day. How does routine manifest in your household?
So routine is less about time and more about sequencing, I think, is maybe the way I would describe it. So, what we usually do is like, when she comes home, we'll usually have like playtime and then dinner time and then bath and then books and then milk and then sing a song and bed, so like there's a sequence, because as she gets older, her nap times like fluctuate, but like kind of keeping that sequence. And, another part of it is like, I ask her if she knows what's coming next, I'm I mean, some of this is just like, for me, there's like personal routines that like I've always kind of kept that have kind of helped me either like get into a flow state or help with the transitions. It's about like a sequence of things. And what's funny is like at this point, she'll pick up if something's out of sequence. Like, honestly, I don't actually know if it's ultimately a good thing or if I'm just gonna like, if I'm just nurturing a neurotic child, like, you know what I mean? Because the other night she was like, no, you said 3 books. We've only done 2. And I'm just like, okay, we're do 3 books, and she gets used to it. So all I can maybe speak to then are like the results, like from a very early age, she slept through the night, very consistent sleeper, which I think is like every parent's like hope and, or nightmare if they're dealing with that. I don't know if there's causation or correlation, but I'm at least like going, okay, we do these things and it seems to work, so let's keep doing them.
I like that it's more about just the sequencing of things and the things themselves versus like, we must do this at this time. It's just, again, it creates some predictability, but it's not rigid. Like if it's 6:05, we need to be, doing this thing.
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, it's funny, right? Because even just like this morning, she woke up. She usually will sleep till, I don't know, 6:45 or 7. Today she was up at like 6. And again, my wife's out of town. So I was like, oh, you're up early today. And she goes, what's early?
That's amazing.
I know. And I was like, yeah, fair enough. She doesn't have a concept of time yet.
Okay. So in that 3-book routine, what is your favorite book to read to your daughter?
My favorite book is The Giving Tree. I mean, it breaks my heart too, because it's just like, it's the tree just gives everything. It's just such a sweet, simple story. I think it totally is like what being a parent's all about. Like you will give it all away, to like help your child out. And it's also like somewhat connected to nature, so like we go on walks together, and she saw a tree stump the other day and she goes, look, the giving tree, and she like wanted to sit on the tree stump, and it was just like so cute. I feel like there are a lot of books we enjoy reading, but I think that personally I feel most connected to is like the story of being a parent.
Yeah It's also one that's like, there are plenty of books that kids like that are just, you're over it as a parent. You don't want to read that book again, but I could probably read The Giving Tree 1,000 times and be fine. It's such a great story. Okay. How has becoming a dad changed your approach to leading teams?
I think in a lot of ways it's made me more zen. Like when your morning starts getting thrown up on, the rest of the day's challenges are like far easier to approach, like especially with a beard. Like getting thrown up on a shirt, Adam, is like one thing, you just take it off. Right? Getting thrown up like in your beard is like, I got to do like 2-3 rounds of shampoo to like get that smell out. And so there's just something about like that kind of makes every like, sort of like panic. And, especially like working in any kind of like leadership role, or especially in the world of growth, like there's fire drills, at any moment sort of like calling your attention. And so to me, it's like helped me sort of somewhat kind of like stay a little bit more level-headed, having that like juxtaposition, especially on mornings like that,
Partnership's obviously very important when you have kids, important at work, important at home, but you can never perfectly agree with your significant other on everything. So what's an area that you and your wife don't 100% agree on when it comes to parenting?
I would say like the approach of like moderation versus abstinence. Like there are things that we kind of are both aligned on where we're like, as long as we can, we want to not introduce her to TV, as an example. As long as we can, we want to not really be on our phones around her. We're sort of aligned at the value level, but I'm maybe a little bit more open and interested in, maybe she's still too early, but like not no exposure. Cause like I had some of that growing up, and then you just like literally get out of the house and you're just like, oh my God, finally, So, I feel like learning kind of self-control and moderation as part of just becoming more independent, and like developing agency and sort of your ability to kind of know when something's not great for yourself, whether it's sugar or alcohol or anything, and kind of like go, okay, like how do I self-moderate? There's just times like that where, if I'm getting real here, I think there was one morning when we both agreed, like, let's limit to no TV. And I had like I was like, Sesame Street will be okay. Like, it's 5 minutes. Like, I was trying to get something else done. We had kind of a big debate over that, and my wife kind of felt like I was kind of violating our values. And it was a big discussion of like, moderation versus abstinence. And also, I think getting to the root of it, is it TV itself that's bad, or is it sort of using it to be a co-parent when things are too hard? I think, there are examples like that I think have helped us get even more kind of on the same page, I guess, of what are the values that we hold and or want her exposed to, and then what's the right way, I think, to like go through that process. So I think I tend to err on like, a little bit's okay, because, it's easy to kind of, again, make rules. And then if you're like all or nothing, when that nothing happens, it's like it's hard to like then recalibrate,
Yeah.
So I think that's probably most where we've had disagreements.
Have the two of you talked about the relationship that you want your daughter to have with technology as she gets older? I mean, can't even fathom what the world's going to be like 10 years from now, when she's on the cusp of being a teenager. What's that conversation like?
If I were to like label myself in broad strokes, I'd call myself like a techno optimist, and there's part of me that's just like, sort of being digitally fluent is going to be really advantageous for her. But on the other hand, it's sort of like, how early, when, I mean, I don't know if you watched that Netflix series Adolescence. It's heavy, and it's sort of like, kind of worth thinking about some of the like social consequences of exposure to tech. I think from our perspective, maybe it goes back to sort of learning moderation, like the most simple way I could put it is I want her to understand its power, which has both good and bad sort of outcomes and consequences. And then maybe the question is like, what's the right age, I guess, to sort of be exposed to something that is so powerful? And tech's broad. It's like, what's the difference between, her playing with Adobe Fresco versus being on social media? And like, there's clearly like a big difference between that. And it's interesting, like our parent thread, is mixed. Like, we have parents that are like, we want to do public school, but it's like, it's all iPads from like kindergarten on. I think we're still honestly kind of trying to process and think through it. And that's maybe the other thing, going back to the control issue, that like, I think I'm like trying to learn is we don't have to know what we want to do 5 years from now. Like we just need to think about like, what are the decisions we need to make today or this week for her, and kind of go forward. Because it can get really overwhelming. You start planning out your kid's whole freaking life and like, okay, telling ourselves it's okay to not fully know yet.
I am curious for you, because you work in tech, and Adobe has done a ton with AI. You've done some personal exploration to help you as a parent. So I'm curious about this cool use of AI that you have for meal times with a picky eater.
We introduced her to solid foods pretty early. And at first we were like, oh my gosh, this is going to go so well. And now we're at a point where it's like mac and cheese 3 out of 4 meals, and I'm just like, what? And similarly, me not coming from an engineering background, but more from sort of a marketing and product background, I was like, there are these tools, obviously Lovable, Bolt. I'm like, I just want to learn them more, sort of like get to explore more the vibe coding landscape. And so I just kind of was like, okay, here's a problem that I have. I'm sure there are solutions, but maybe building my own solution would be a chance to also learn this landscape a little bit more. So I've basically been working on kind of building an app called Picky Eater. The problem that I kind of wanted to solve was, our daughter, she goes in these waves of trying foods, liking some, not. And I wanted a way to like sort of track both the things that she liked to eat and then maybe get suggestions of like, cool, if she likes this, maybe you try this, and sort of expand her palette, but like build off of things that she already seems naturally inclined to like. And then also sort of keep track of things that she doesn't like and like come up with some plan to like revisit them or whatever. it was one of those where I'm like, there are kind of solutions, obviously, in programs that like kind of exist for this. So I don't think it's like solving something in a totally new way, but more just it's been a lot of fun to like kind of build that experience for our own use,
Yeah. And now you will have to add special K, specifically with the red berries, to the no column.
Exactly.
So that is a very cool concept. And also, just an amazing use of AI. There's probably something somewhat like this, as you mentioned, out there, but like not the exact thing that you need, and going in and exploring and building yourself is now possible. So
I think that's the most amazing thing. Yeah. It's just sort of being able to go beyond even prototype and like actually have like a working app, and obviously I don't have plans to commercialize it. So I'm not thinking about security and storage and all, like all of the things that you see on X about vibe coding gone wrong, spring break gone wild, vibe coding gone wild. But it's been a lot of fun. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
What is the most interesting food suggestion that it has come up with?
So she has always seemed to like sweet potatoes. And so I was like, okay, here's sweet potatoes. It recommended roasted parsnip fries. And I don't know that I had ever eaten a parsnip in my life. And she loves them. I mean, it's been great. But it was like, I kind of realized like the build was like, keep texture similar, or like, I think the other tip is like involving her in the making of the process, so like helping her cut things like also gets her more open-minded to trying it, because it's like, you cooked this,
Last question for you before our lightning round, and that is, if you could rewind the clock to the time right before your daughter was born, and you bump into Mike, the younger pre-parent Mike, what's this kind of single piece of advice that you would give your younger self? And then one thing that you tell yourself to do differently?
Just focus on the next step, because it is so easy to get spun up on like the butterfly effect of each decision that like we make. And it's kind of funny because I'm like, a lot of this is the same advice I like give to my teams, when you kind of get into analysis. It's like, what's the next, like break it into the next, the smallest bit that you can just keep moving forward. But for some reason as a parent, it's like, do we open up a 529? How, like, is like college even going to be a thing? Like, do I need to know the answer to that? It's just like, okay, what's the next step? It's like, we want to put money away for her future. Like, okay, so that's just the next step. Like, just start doing that, like we don't have to decide necessarily what vehicle it's going to be yet. And like whether college is going to be a thing in 20 years. That's an example of like, just start putting money aside, And so I think that is like the advice is sort of don't think too far out. I mean, it's important to do it, but also just sort of look at like the next small step in front of you.
Yeah. And is that sort of mirrored what you would do differently? Maybe don't overanalyze decisions or something like that?
For sure. Yeah. I mean, especially early on, like where my wife and I kind of found the most tense, she was like, hey, let's introduce a phrase, don't be the expert. She was like, so I'm going to let you dad the way you want to dad, and I'm going to mom the way I want to mom. And if you want to put her diaper on backwards, like go for it. I'm not going to be your expert. Doing that, which I think we ended up kind of transitioning to at like 4 or 5 months, has made all the difference, right? Because it's like, we're in this together. We each have our own, little nuanced ways of doing things and like where she sits when she eats. But like, at the end of the day, my wife wants to put her in her high chair, or if she wants to put her on a normal chair, like who cares, like,
right.
And so I think that's been a good adjustment, kind of going back to the theme of just like control and letting go more and trusting the process.
Cool. Okay. Well, if you have a few more minutes for lightning round, I want to ask you before we get into that, how can people follow along or be helpful to you?
So outside of my kind of day job, like I love meeting like early stage startups, founders who are looking for go-to-market advice or support. I'm involved with a few different like early stage funds as like an advisor. So I'm always open to that. I love meeting and hearing what people are building. And I'm probably like online most active, I'd say on LinkedIn.
Okay.
You can find me there. And yeah, looking forward to connecting with folks.
Awesome. I will send people to LinkedIn to find you. Okay. Lightning round.
All
Here
right.
we go. This is always fun. What is the most indispensable parenting product that you've ever purchased?
Okay, it's like the dumbest product ever. It's basically like a fidget spinner that like has a suction cup. So like we've had to fly quite a few times and there's only so much you can do. And like this little suction cup, like fidget spinner that she can just spin around has kept her entertained. I kid you not, on car rides, on like plane flights, like so much more than I would ever expect. That it's like, especially traveling, it's so simple, so easy, and like truly indispensable.
Amazing. I have heard another parent talk about this, and they use it specifically on airplanes and specifically when they have to change their kid's diaper on an airplane. They just stick it to the ceiling, and the kid's like,
so brilliant.
I might need to buy one of these for myself.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, what is the most useless parenting product you ever purchased?
The nose sucker, like the nose Frida. It just never seems to work. Like I know people swear by it, but I'm just like, we can't get it out. Like, and so it has like the most promise because the last thing I want to do is like manually suck snot out of my kid's nose.
Right.
But that unfortunately has been like the most useless product for us.
Okay, so we're a no on the nose Frida. All right.
Yeah.
True or false? There is only one correct way to load the dishwasher.
True.
Whose way? Your way?
Yeah, my way. Yes, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah. To give my wife credit, she gets way more in the dishwasher than I do. Like when I go, oh, it's full because like, you know, everything's in there. She's like, oh, there's so many more things you can just shove in there.
Yep. Everybody wins in this situation.
Yep.
What is your signature dad's superpower?
So I don't know why I do this, but I'll just like put on a hat and become a different character for my daughter. So part of it is the like change the channel thing where it's just like, sometimes if we just are in a funk, I'll grab a cowboy hat and like, you know, all of a sudden I'm Marshall Mike coming to like, you know, bring her out to the pasture, you know, and she just loves it. You know, it's just like make up dumb voices and like different characters. So I think at least for now, that's probably my superpower.
Okay, I love that. What is a crazier block of time in your house? 6 a.m. to 8 a.m. or 6 p.m. to 8 p.m.?
Oh, PM for sure. Yeah. Like our daughter's an angel when she wakes up. Like she's just like so sweet. But like the fight to the bath, as I mentioned, and just like everything, even though we're going through the whole routine, it's just like a fight till the finish line.
If she had to describe you in one word, what would it be?
Silly. Right. Now that's just the word she's been using. I'm like, maybe I'm silly, but she's always like, Dad, silly. Okay. All right.
Okay. There it is. How many parenting books do you have in your house?
Not that many. Maybe 10. I don't know. Is 10 not that many?
That's like an average good amount, I think.
Yeah.
How many of those parenting books have you read cover to cover?
2, for sure. Only 2.
Impressive. That's a bigger answer than I usually get. So. How many dad jokes do you tell on average each day?
Far too many to keep track of. Let's just put it that way. I can keep count of the number of times my wife rolls her eyes more than I can remember the number of attempted dad jokes.
Yeah, that is how you know a high quality dad joke is by how far the eyes roll back in the head.
100%. Yeah.
What is your favorite kids movie?
We're still at a point where we're not watching kids movies. I'm not there yet, and I'm sure it'll happen before I want it to.
Okay, do you have a nostalgic movie from your childhood or, you know, younger adult life, whatever, that you just can't wait to force your daughter to watch?
Goonies.
Okay. Yep.
And Back to the Future. Probably both of those are like, I cannot wait to watch those with her.
A couple classics. Just a few more for you. What is the worst experience that you've ever had assembling a kid's toy or a piece of furniture?
So the high chair we have, it's like a Swedish brand. And I swear it's not like IKEA, but it's just like, it was the most difficult, like the angles to try to fit some of these pieces together and like just the sheer number of parts. It's a high chair. How are there 50 small parts to this thing?
Right. Oh,
Yeah.
okay. Swedish high chairs. Watch out for them. Do you have a favorite dad hack for road trips or flights? Perhaps it is the fidget spinner. I don't know.
No, I have another one. Audiobooks. Think about how many books you read. Almost all of them, you can find somebody reading them on Spotify or whatever, like audio app of your choice. So I just like made a playlist of like all these, all of her books, and it keeps her like occupied without us having to listen to like god awful children's music. It's been great because I think, it's like been the easiest thing to sort of keep her mentally occupied, and like she's totally open to like listening to these audio stories. So that's been like total like success for us.
Okay. Maybe coupled with the fidget spinner.
Oh, that is like
spinning and listening.
Yes.
Yeah. Heaven.
Great combo.
Okay. Last question for you. You only have one kid, but what is your take on minivans?
I don't want to hate on people who have minivans. My take on minivans, kind of my same take on like dads who wear Crocs, like if I'm being real. You might as well get either the free pair of Crocs with the minivan or the minivan with the Crocs. I respect people who have minivans. I myself will not ever be an owner.
Okay. All right. I love that. We went deep cut with the Crocs there too.
Yeah.
So. All right, Mike. It was such a pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you for joining me, and best of luck to you and your wife and your daughter who hates the dried berries in the Special K.
Hates the dried berries. Adam, thank you so much. This was so much fun.
Thank you for listening to today's conversation with Michael Leibovich. You can subscribe and watch the show on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Visit www.startupdadpod.com to learn more and browse past episodes. Thanks for listening. See you next week.